Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. It was a crisp autumn morning in 2017 when the quiet town of Ravenswood woke to a sound that would echo through its streets for years to come, a sound that no one could have anticipated. Nestled amongst dense forests and rolling hills, Ravenswood had long enjoyed its reputation as a peaceful enclave, where the biggest news of the year revolved around the summer fair or the high school football team. But that morning, as the sun began its ascent, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and pink, a grim discovery would shatter a fragile calm. Early risers, the townsfolk were drawn to the local park, where a medley of colors from fallen leaves lined the paths. But as they approached the usually inviting space, a knot of police cars and yellow tape encircled a crime scene that would consume the community. In the center lay a body lifeless, sprawled upon the ground near the faded swing set that had once been the source of childhood laughter. The victim, identified shortly after as 24-year-old Clara Donovan, had been a beloved figure in the town, known for her spirited volunteer work at the animal shelter and her infectious laugh that seemed to brighten even the gloomiest days. As the forensic team meticulously combed the area, the air thickened with tension, dark whispers weaving through the crowd. Clara's parents, distraught and clutching each other, became a focal point of grief for the townspeople who whispered of unspeakable horrors. Little by little, the idyllic image of Ravenswood began to fracture as questions blurred the lines between neighborly camaraderie and quiet suspicion. The innocence of the town was sacrificed that day, leaving a haunting abyss of question that demanded answers. Who could commit such a heinous act in their midst? The investigation had only just begun, but it was clear to all that Ravenswood would never be the same. The past had come crashing into the present, and fog settled over the town, a fog that no one could shake up. The victim, Clara Donovan, had always been the kind of person who brought light into a room of vibrant soul, who seemed to embrace life with infectious enthusiasm. Born and raised in Ravenswood, she was the daughter of Charles and Janet Donovan, two steadfast residents who had poured their hearts into the community. Clara's laughter was often heard wafting from the local cafe, where she worked part-time, serving hot cocoa to neighbors on chilly afternoons and sharing stories about her love for animals, inspired by her volunteer work at the local shelter. On weekends, Clara organized puppy adoption events that drew crowds. The shelter, a modest building at the end of Willow Lane, often felt like a second home to her. It was there she brought joy to countless strays, nursing them back to health while coaxing fearful eyes to trust her gentle touch. Clara was a beacon of hope, not just for the animals, but for those around her. Now her absence echoed desolately in the air, affecting her family, friends, and the entire town. As the details of his shocking fate began to unfold, Clara's life was scrutinized under the harsh glare of media scrutiny and police investigations. Friends recounted her childhood adventures, painting a picture of a girl who had grown into an extraordinary woman, determined to make the world a better place, one small act at a time. Detectives sifted through Clara's life, searching for clues that could illuminate her strange demise. They questioned her friends, recounting those stories of kindness, laughter, and love. Yet whispers of her personal struggles began to surface. Friends would mention fleeting conversations about feeling overwhelmed, of fleeting relationships that left her heartbroken. Behind the vibrant exterior was a young woman, grappling with doubt and disappointment. veiled by optimism. The police wondered if these shadows might hold the key to understanding her death, the unraveling threads of Clara's life, tangled in the mysteries of humanity, now a tapestry of tragedy. As images of Clara plastered the news, her personality shone through grim headlines, evoking not just sorrow, but also a sense of collective accountability. In Ravenswood, Clara was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a friend, an irreplaceable part of the community that was now fractured, waiting for the truth to emerge from the shadows cast over her bright legacy. The crime scene. The sun had risen high by the time the forensic team began to arrive at the park, casting long shadows across the freshly fallen leaves. The jangling of equipment and the muffled murmurs of police chatter filled the air, an eerie contrast to the serenity that typically characterized Ravenswood's mornings. Detectives in crisp blue uniforms moved with a sense of urgency, their faces set in grim determination as they entered the perimeter marked by yellow tape that fluttered gently in the October breeze. The swing set, once a playground for laughter, now stood somberly witness to tragedy. Clara's body lay against the cold earth, her serene expression belying the violence that had shattered her life. Clothed in a soft denim jacket and her favorite brown boots, she appeared oddly peaceful, lips still bearing the faintest hint of a smile, preserved like a haunting photograph of a life cut short. Yet a slight disturbance marred the picturesque autumn scene, a pool of crimson, stark against the earthy backdrop, draining life away from a vibrant spirit. Detectives re-examined the scene, grounding their investigation in unyielding focus. Each piece of evidence was meticulously catalogued. The angle of the body, blood splatter patterns on the ground, and the absence of any belongings that might offer clues. Clara's discarded cell phone lay a few feet away, the screen shattered, echoing a final tragic reminder of lost communication. Nearby, her purse, stylish and simple, was untouched, adding layers of mystery to the unfolding story, suggesting either a targeted killing or a sudden altercation. The forensic team meticulously collected samples, hair, fibers, the faint scent of a cologne that lingered in the air. Everything became part of the puzzle. A pair of officers canvassed the area, interviewing the few witnesses who would gather. Their scattered recollections came tinged with confusion and fear, many expressing disbelief that such a thing could happen in their town, where curtains were usually drawn not from fear, but to shield intimate family moments. As dusk began to settle, casting an uneasy glow over the park, the scene transformed into a solemn testament of lost innocence. Clara's smile dangled in the hearts of those who knew her, now inseparable from the haunting echoes of purpose lost. Drawn into the depths of their grief, the townsfolk began to face the stark truth. Clara's murder had irrevocably changed them. The once serene paths of Ravenswood now whispered tragedy, and as twilight descended, the palpable weight of the investigation pressed on. The hunt for justice had begun, but the answers lay tangled in the shadows of the town, waiting for someone to unravel them. The early investigation. In the immediate aftermath of Clara Donovan's murder, the Ravenswood Police Department found itself at a crossroad. The small force, unaccustomed to dealing with violent crime of this magnitude, called upon neighboring units for assistance, igniting a flurry of activity that shattered the quieter rhythms of their daily routines. Lead investigator Detective Mark Reynolds, a seasoned officer with over a decade of experience in homicide cases, stepped into the role with quiet authority. Determined to piece together the fragments of this tragedy. Shortly after the crime scene was secured, Reynolds gathered his team for a briefing at the station. They reviewed the known facts. Clara was last seen leaving her job at the cafe around 9 p.m. the previous night. The surveillance footage showed her walking to her car, petite figure clad in denim, her golden hair illuminated by the falling streetlights. But after that, the trail went cold. The detective scoured the recordings, searching for fleeting shadows of individuals who may have lingered in the background, seeking anything that could lead them to a suspect. As interviews unfolded, disturbing rumors arose. Friends recounted Clara's recent tensions, a complicated relationship with a man named Lucas, whose obsession had raised red flags among his circle. Tearful whispers suggested that Clara had sought to break things off, leading to heated exchanges that left her uneasy. Reynolds recognized how deep emotional ties could bend or sever lives, and they accounted for Lucas in their line of questioning. Simultaneously, he understood the weight of building trust with the community. He spoke at town hall meetings, offering reassurance despite the anguish in their collective heart. His words seemed to resonate, stitching a tapestry of solidarity among townsfolk trying to process the horror that had invaded their sanctuary. Meanwhile, at the shelter, Clara's colleagues organized a vigil, candles flickering against the encroaching dark. Their sorrow morphed into determination, rallying support to help find justice for Clara, and the investigation began to feel less like a solitary pursuit and more like a shared responsibility, one that held the potential to heal fractured bonds. Inside the station, as evidence emerged from forensic reports, fingerprints, DNA samples, and possible leads on uneasy anticipation hung in the air. Days turned into long nights filled with relentless work. With each clue, hope flickered like a candle, illuminating the path forward while casting shadows of doubt. As the community braced itself for answers, the urgency of the investigation intensified, binding the fate of many to the resolution of a singular tragedy. The clock was ticking, and every moment brought them closer or further away from finding the truth. The dead ends. Weeks slipped by like autumn leaves swirling in a cold breeze. But with the turning of the calendar, clarity proved elusive for the Ravenswood Police Department. In the early days of the investigation, hope had surged vibrantly, fueled by community support and initial leads. Yet, as Detective Mark Reynolds pored over the evidence, it became clear that the path to justice was riddled with frustration and unyielding dead ends. Despite reviewing hours of footage from the cafe's security cameras, reliable sightings of Clara evaporated as she vanished into the night. Lucas, the man who had raised concern among Clara's friends, had been cooperative, yet his repeated alibi hovered like an unsteady flame. Detective Reynolds spent hours interrogating him, seeking cracks in his story, but each potential lead turned to dust under scrutiny. Lucas claimed he had stayed home, distracted by a video game marathon, isolated and alone. Without physical evidence to challenge his account, he remained a litany of unanswered questions or suspicions that wouldn't turn to conviction without a solid foundation. With limited direction emerging from Clara's personal relationships, the detectives shifted to canvass the local scene, interviewing friends, acquaintances, and even strangers who may have interacted with her. In the days leading up to her death, the town buzzed with gossip. Intimate details about Clara becoming public fodder painted a blurred picture. Some spoke of her warmth, others of jealousy and rivalry among friends. Each interview closed more doors than it opened, trapping the investigation in a maze of hearsay and speculation. The forensic lab, overwhelmed with cases from around the region, delivered tepid updates on analyzed evidence. Possible DNA samples found at the scene bore no matching profiles in existing databases, further compounding the frustration. The town's grip of anxiety tightened as autumn waned toward winter. Crisp air transformed into a biting chill, mirroring the growing despair felt by Clara's loved ones. In their fevered search for answers, hopes flickered dimly beneath the weight of the cold case. Detective Reynolds remained dogged in his pursuit. He re-examined Clara's social media, seeking hidden connection threads, each like a ghost, lingering just out of reach. He revisited the timeline, sketching it anew, desperate to uncover a link that would breathe life back into this flatlining investigation. As night enfolded the town, weary from heartbreak and unease, the detectives faced a haunting realization sometimes. Despite every effort, the answers they sought remained enshrouded behind thick fog. Just beyond their grasp, they could not afford to lose hope. But they found themselves standing at the precipice of uncertainty, suspended in a world where justice waited just out of reach. A break in the case. As winter settled over Ravenswood with its biting winds and soft white blankets of snow, a sense of stillness hung heavily over the town. The absence of resolution left Clara Donovan's murder echoing in the hearts of its residents, and Detective Mark Reynolds grappled with the frustrating sense that time was running thin. Yet, as the holiday season neared, hope took an unexpected turn when a breakthrough ambled into the department, a glimmering shard of clarity amidst the shadows. It began with a seemingly routine call from the local pharmacy about an unclaimed prescription. A staff member remembered Clara visiting a few days before her death to pick up medication. The interactions had seemed normal, but they revealed an important detail that caught the eye of the detectives. Clara had returned to the store to purchase a refill for a prescription that had been initially prescribed for anxiety, an unexpected twist they had overlooked. It signaled to Reynolds that perhaps Clara had been managing deeper struggles than her friends had perceived. Later that day, the detective interviewed the pharmacist, who recounted that Clara appeared distracted, repeatedly checking her phone with a furrowed brow. She'd mentioned feeling overwhelmed and asked for advice about stress management techniques, tipping her hand that she was wrestling with something just beneath the surface. What stirred in Reynolds' gut was a gnawing sensation that Clara may have confided in someone during that tumultuous period leading up to her death. With renewed vigor, the investigative team pivoted their focus. They combed through Clara's phone records, unearthing contacts she had communicated with in the weeks prior. Reynolds leaned on technology, aware that Clara had a social circle broader than those who just frequented the coffee shop. Tracing her digital footprints became a vital mission. Among the contacts, one number stood out: a friend from college, Jenna, who had a history of mental health advocacy and who seemed to have maintained close ties with Clara through text messages. When Reynolds and his partner tracked down Jenna, her manner was immediately engaging. She spoke warmly of Clara, expressing concern about her struggles. As they delved deeper into the unresolved threads of their friendship, Jenna divulged that Clara had confided in her about someone, a man, who had begun to act possessive, pushing far beyond the bounds of normalcy into upset. As Jenna detailed these troubling conversations, Reynolds felt the shadows shifting, unnerving, yet electrifying. For the first time in months, the case felt undeniably alive. Threads connecting circles of acquaintances spun together, hinting at the chaotic intensity of youthful attachments and alliances. Every new revelation added a layer of urgency as the detectives prepared for their next move. A renewed energy swept through the station. Clara's story was no longer waiting in silence. The tide had turned, and they were determined to carry her voice forward through the haze, bringing the dark truth into clear light. The suspect. With the weight of the new revelations anchored firmly in their hearts, the Ravenswood detectives began to steer their investigation toward a singular focus: Ryan Cole, the man Jenna had described as the possessive figure in Clara's life. An acquaintance from her college days, Ryan had initially appeared harmless. Yet the shadow of jealousy reportedly began to emerge as their friendship deepened. As Clara's concern seeped into Jenna's voice, a troubling portrait began to emerge when framed by obsession and distress. The detectives accessed a digital trail that revealed considerably more than Clara's friendly exchanges. Ryan's messages had turned tense and heated. Investigators painstakingly pieced together their correspondence, revealing escalating attempts to control Clara and attempts to intervene in her friendships, typically through demands juxtaposed with affectionate notes. Clara had started to grow distant, a predictable reaction to someone so intent on shaping her world, evident even in their final conversation. Anxiously, Reynolds and his team compiled evidence and organized a focused surveillance operation on Ryan. It all culminated one deepening evening in early December. Under the cover of fading twilight, detectives patiently followed him through town, taking note of each move as he traveled between his home and a local bar where he frequently socialized. Observing his behavior, they sensed an underlying tension, a fear flickering in the shadows of his otherwise unassuming action. The following day, as snow began to lightly dust the ground, Reynolds and his partner approached Ryan outside the bar, their intention clear. Ryan's familiar blue eyes flickered with uncertainty, sensing that something more serious lay beneath the surface of their casual greeting. After exchanging pleasantries, it became evident that they intended to question him about Clara. Ryan's demeanor shifted, subtle, yet palpable. Reynolds noted the tightening of his jaw and the way he shifted uncomfortably under the growing baseline of scrutiny. As the questions rolled out, the detective pressed him about his last interactions with Clara. Ryan protested, recounting a casual hangout only days before she passed, though a hesitant edge underlined his worry. No matter how he attempted to veer the conversation toward their shared classmates or parties, every question brought him back to the uncertainty swirling around Clara. Drawing closer, Reynolds observed the cracks in Ryan's facade. The fabric of his story began to fray. Inconsistencies crept in as the detective interrogated him further. The mention of Clara's renewed friendships, especially with Jenna, sparked an intense reaction, a flash of something protective and jealous mingling beneath the surface of his otherwise calculated words. It confirmed the suspicion swirling around Ryan. They couldn't ignore the possibility that his obsession had taken a darker turn. After a tense hour of questioning, the detectives bid Ryan farewell, but not without ensuring they had formed a crucial psychological profile in their mind. A young man with intimate knowledge of Clara's vulnerabilities, layered by a sense of entitlement and ultimately jealousy. The pieces were leaning toward him as a suspect in Clara's untimely death, even without direct evidence in hand. And as the investigation continued to unfold, the shadow of his influence lingered. With every breath, the chase intensified. Detective Reynolds could feel the momentum shifting ominously in the air. Justice was inching closer. But the specter of doubt still loomed large over their burgeoning conclusion. The road ahead bristled with uncertainty, yet the growing simmer of the case promised to reveal the truth that Clara and the town of Ravenswood desperately sought. The trial. The courtroom rose with a solemn air on what was to become a pivotal day for Clara Donovan's family and the Ravenswood community as a whole. Almost a year after her tragic death, the trial of Ryan Cole commenced, and every seat was filled with familiar faces, friends, family, and neighbors, eagerly seeking justice for a life that had been cruelly extinguished. The atmosphere crackled with tension as anticipation coiled tightly around the room. The prosecutor, a steely-eyed woman named Lisa Mendez, took center stage, her commanding presence demanding attention. She began with a heart-wrenching account of Clara's life, a vivid portrayal of her laughter, her kindness, and the devastating loss suffered by those left behind. Mendez recounted the harrowing timeline leading up to Clara's death, threading together testimonies from friends, family, and surveillance footage that painted intricate layers of the relationship between Clara and Ryan. A detailed narrative unfolded, depicting not just obsession, but profound emotional turmoil, navigated through Clara's struggles with anxiety and her desperate attempts to reclaim her independence. As the prosecution laid out their case, the air grew thick with raw emotion. Jenna, Clara's steadfast friend, took the stand, recounting the moments when Clara had opened up about Ryan's controlling behavior. Each word layered with pain. The courtroom hung on her every sound as she described the concern that had led to their conversations, illuminated by a sense of foreboding. Ryan's attempts to dictate Clara's life felt haunting. Jenna's testimony resonated, echoing through the stillness like a warning bell. The defense lawyers, however, quickly attempted to shift the focus. They painted a contrasting portrait of Ryan, attempting to dislodge the narrative built by the prosecution. They sought to depict him as a misguided friend, tragically misunderstood, a boy in love who had lost his way, but did not possess the malice required to commit murder. As testimonies unfolded, they scrutinized Clara's struggles with mental health, a complex narrative, revealing vulnerabilities they hoped would sow seeds of doubt about Ryan's guilt. Day after day, the emotional roller coaster climbed to harrowing heights and crashed into valleys of despair. Witnesses recalled Clara's vibrant essence, but the defense painted a stark, fragmented picture. As evidence mounted, the courtroom battled a palpable anguish as the family of Clara sat in quiet anguish, questions swirling about the motives, the betrayaliac moment, a reminder of their fracture. The culmination of the trial reached a fever pitch as the judge called for closing arguments. Mendez stood again, her voice steady yet impassioned as she urged the jurors to remember Clara. She implored them to see beyond the defense's attempts at distraction and to focus on the evidence before them. "He took her light," Mendez stated, her eyes glistening with determination. "He thought he could control her. But love should never mean possession." As the jury retired to deliberate, an air of uncertainty settled over the courtroom. Each tick of the clock felt weighty, as the gathered community held their breath. After 2 long days, the jury returned, their expressions unreadable. The judge took his seat. The courtroom hushed in anticipation, the air thick with fervent hope and fear. "Do you find the defendant, Ryan Cole, guilty or not guilty of the murder of Clara Donovan?" the judge asked, his voice echoing through the stillness. With hearts pounding, the corridor of truth finally had its reckoning. "We find the defendant guilty." The weight of the verdict rippled through the room, a communal exhale mingling with tears of relief and grief. Clara's family embraced, enveloped in emotional turmoil, while a quiet resolve surged within the community, a deep-rooted understanding that justice although complicated and fraught with pain, had finally reached the surface. Clara Donovan was still lost to them, yet in death, she had become a symbol of strength and resilience. As the gavel fell, marking the end of the trial, the collective spirit of Ravenswood emerged, determined to honor her memory and to ensure her story would echo through time, forever woven into the fabric of their life. The aftermath. In the weeks following Ryan Cole's conviction, Ravenswood found itself wrestling with a complex tapestry of emotions, relief interlaced with mourning, justice mingling with unresolved questions. As the community emerged from the pall of grief and uncertainty, the weight of Clara Donovan's murder lingered heavily in the air, serving as a jarring reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of human being. In the aftermath of the trial, Clara's family found solace in the small yet meaningful gestures of support from townsfolk. The Donovan household was filled with warmth as friends and neighbors flooded their home with food, flowers, and heartfelt condolences. Together, they shared stories of Clara, recounting her laughter, her dreams, and the way she had touched everyone's lives. Conversations inevitably turned somber, yet amidst the tears, they sparked a powerful resolve. Clara's legacy would not fade into the background of tragedy. Jenna organized a memorial event at the local park that had grown somber with the loss of its spirit. With each flickering candlelight, they honored Clara's vibrant life and her unwavering passion for animal rescue, dedicating a new small enclosure at the shelter in her name. The outpouring of love was palpable as residents, both young and old, listened to stories, shared laughter, and shed tears, determined to ensure that Clara's memory would live on in a community that had come together to heal. Among the stirring gatherings, Detective Mark Reynolds demonstrated the same empathy that had driven him in his investigation. As he attended the memorial, he vowed to continue working tirelessly to support initiatives focused on mental health and awareness, channeling the collective grief into a greater cause. Reynolds began collaborating with local mental health advocates to launch workshops that aim to foster open dialogues around relationships, boundaries, and emotional well-being. It was crucial to educate the community that recognizing unhealthy dynamics could prevent future tragedies. As months passed, Ravenswood cautiously ventured back to normalcy. The town's annual events resumed: fall festivals, high school football games, and holiday celebrations saw continuing to grapple with the juxtaposition of joy and loss. The swings that had once served as a backdrop to Clara's final moments were now adorned with flower tokens of remembrance and resilience that offered a poignant reminder of the past. For the Donovan family, healing remained a delicate journey, marked by the absence of Clara's presence at each family gathering. They found comfort in community, leaning on the bonds forged in shared tragedy. Over time, they learned to navigate this new landscape, rekindling joy in their lives as Clara emerged from the shadows into a beacon of hope. Her story, preventing the silence that so often enveloped victims of violence. However, the echoes of her murder continue to ripple throughout each crevice of Ravenswood. Old houses still bore witness to secrets and sorrow. But as the town moved forward, community members began to forge tighter connections. Clara's legacy served as a moral compass, a guiding light reminding them all of their collective responsibility toward each other. In the end, the weight of loss transformed into fuel for change, a determination to cultivate a safer, more compassionate mindset that would honor Clara's life and ensure her journey wouldn't be defined solely by her fate. As the sun rose on a new season, the indelible imprint of a vibrant young woman persisted in the hearts of a community bound by love, loyalty, and the desire for a brighter tomorrow. Reflection. As the seasons changed and Ravenswood transitioned from the somber tones of winter to the renewal that spring brings, the town found itself immersed in a complex. The scabs of loss had begun to heal, but the memories of Clara Donovan lingered like a soft shadow, gracefully intertwining with everyday life, a silent tribute to a life cut short, a reminder of the fragility of existence. Detective Mark Reynolds often revisited the reflections of the case, pondering how tangible grief could foster such resiliency in a community. Conversations about violence, mental health, and the importance of understanding personal connections had left an imprint far deeper than he had anticipated. What had initially begun as an investigation for justice had evolved into a mission of awareness, a campaign for compassion that amplifies voices silenced by fear. Clara's family found solace in engaging with local mental health organizations. They turned their grief into advocacy, embarking on school seminars and awareness programs aimed at educating young people about healthy relationships and support systems. At the heart of these discussions lay Clara's story, a narrative of hope and courage, encouraging others to look beyond their challenges and find strength in connection.